Welcome, everybody. We're just getting our bearings here. Be starting in a second. Councilmember Feynman, are you good to go here?
Good to go.
Good to go.
6:02, so let's get started.
Let's get it started. Would you like me to start?
Sure, go ahead.
Great. Well, welcome to everybody here. My name is Steve Burdo of the San Anselmo Town Council, and with me is our Vice Mayor, Alexis Feynman. And tonight we are holding a community forum to predominantly gather input about the issue with what to do with the name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Just by way of background, I'll give you a little history on kind of how we've come to this point. This process started over the summer, essentially, and it started amidst events happening both nationally and some local, some closer to home here. And as a result, there was a lot of interest in changing the name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. At that time, the county convened a committee representing every jurisdiction that runs along the Sir Francis Drake corridor, and that includes Larkspur, Fairfax, the county, Ross, and of course San Anselmo. And in that process, we held first a community listening session that was back in the summer, and then about a month later, they held a community learning session, which had a panel of experts, including representatives of the Coast Miwok tribe and local historians and members of the education community. And so there was a lot of information presented at those forums, both the listening session and the learning session. Both of those you can find on our town website. There's a link to the pages at the county that have those on them if you haven't had a chance to look at them. But after that, the committee reconvened, and we felt the next step was, if anything was going to happen, we had to understand the costs. So staff of the multi-jurisdictional agencies all took a role in doing the research and getting the information to bring back to the committee. They did in fall of 2020. And at that time, once we were provided the information on the costs, the next step was essentially for us to all go back to our own communities and have a formal community input process. We discussed this at a recent town council meeting and agreed to move forward with this process. And this is the first public hearing on this issue. I'm not sure if we'll have other public hearings quite like this, which is more of an input session. The next quote public hearings we'll have will be at our council meetings, and I hope that everybody's here participating today will participate in those opportunities as well. But that's how we got here, and our point here tonight is to, like I said, listen to our community, provide this opportunity for public input, and gather information so that we as a town council can ultimately make a decision on what to do. With that, I'll ask Councilmember Feynman, do you have anything to add or anything you want to go over?
Sure. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. First, I'll just welcome everyone to this meeting. Thank you for coming out. And I would like to just open by acknowledging that we are on the ancestral and unceded homelands of Coast Miwok people, whose presence in Marin County, or what is now Marin County, has been ongoing since time immemorial. And so in acknowledging Coast Miwok people today, despite colonization and land theft and genocide and the ongoing legacies of of all those, they're still here. And I invite everyone who's here just to take a moment to consider that terms like colonization are not abstract or academic, but are real concepts that continue to shape people's lives. So with that, I will say thank you. And before we get started with public comment, I will also add that there's a number of resources on the town's website summarizing some of the previous steps that we've taken that Steve has outlined. And those will continue to be posted on the town's website. Right now, you can access them from the homepage. And then before we get started with public comment, I just wanted to share some community guidelines for participation. The town of San Anselmo affirms everyone's right to participate in public process and engage in free speech through public comment. But we also recognize that topics of racial injustice require particular sensitivity, as speech and language have contributed to real and ongoing oppression of marginalized groups, particularly Black and Indigenous people of color. So the town of San Anselmo additionally affirms the rights of all people to participate in political and civic life free from bigotry and intimidation based on race, religion, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or any other aspect of their being. So with this in mind, as you prepare to make public comment, we ask sincerely that you remember that words, no matter the intention, can have a tremendous impact on others. And we respectfully ask that all participants adhere to the guidelines, the community guidelines that are posted on the screen, including no profanity or obscenity, refraining from personal attacks or threats, respect all people and all groups of people, refrain from hateful epithets and demeaning language or stereotypes based on hate of a person's race, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or disability, no yelling or screaming, and please respect all people that are present and watching. So with that, are we ready to open it up?
Thank you. This is Town Manager David Donnery, and I'll be handling the calls today. And I ask that anybody who would like to make a comment use the raise your hand feature, and we'll automatically populate our list with people who do want to make comments. And if you're on a phone, which I don't actually see anybody on the phone, but in case there's somebody out there on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand on the phone. And then once it's your turn, I'll let you know it's you by calling out your phone number, and then you will push *6 to unmute. So with that, I am happy to start taking public comment. I don't see anybody's hands raised, so I'm hoping that's working. There we go. Okay, I'm going to start with Judy. Judy, I'm going to allow you to talk, and then you can unmute yourself. Can we hear you, Judy?
I cannot.
Okay.
How about that?
There we go.
There we go. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying I've lived in the same house on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard for 42 years. And I have a huge backlog of personal, professional, legal, medical folks that I would have to contact if my address was changed. I feel it will have a negative impact on me. And I'd like to know the percentage of people who are for this change, what percentage of them actually live or own a business on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. One other thing I'd like to say, we are not living in the past. We're living in the present. And I feel this desire to want to change the name of the street is taking us back into the past but using present day moral values. And I don't think that's fair. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, I don't see any more hands. So if somebody wants to, there we go. I'm going to Noah Block. I'm going to allow you to speak.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, welcome.
Well, I can't hear anyone.
We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we
Hello?
can hear you.
Now I can hear you. Apologies. Hi, my name's Noah Block. I have grown up in San Anselmo. I went to school at High School 1327. I served there in a leadership capacity in the student government as well as the TAM district. And I also wrote the petition to change the name of that high school. I am now a 21-year-old in college, and I'm ashamed of the community that I grew up in, that we continue to hold this name with such dignity, to put it as a symbol to represent our community, as a street sign, as a school, on different locations around our county. I do want to echo, and I think this has been a valid criticism from different people in the community, that this is performative, and I agree. It is one part of many parts that we need to address in our community about how white supremacy is involved in our government and in our community. And I think that this is one part of many that we need to take to move that process forward. I think many of us have probably read the article that, this monument to white supremacy hides in plain sight. That was, I believe, in the San Francisco Chronicle, New York Times. I'm blanking on which, but I really want to emphasize a speaker who spoke at a county meeting this summer, who described the name change is not erasing history, as some have described, but it's recognizing a history that's long erased. And that's really what we're looking to change here. It's coming to terms with the history that we have not addressed. It's been silenced, and the voices who have been silenced and oppressed for hundreds of years in our communities. And I really hope we do change that name. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah.
Okay, next we have Michael. Michael, I'm going to allow you to talk. And you can unmute yourself.
Okay, here I am. My name is Michael. I do own a business on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. I just want to point out, Sir Francis Drake was not a white supremacist. He was not a racist. He was not a colonizer. I don't know where people think he was colonizing. He was English. He died in 1596. At 1596, England had no overseas colonies, not one at all. His only real tie to colonialism is that he fought pretty hard against the main colonizing power of the town, and that was Spain. He didn't colonize here. Spain did. He didn't colonize anywhere. He didn't attempt to colonize anywhere. White supremacy, no, he was not. He wouldn't have occurred to him to be. He worked with many kinds of people. He did participate in the slave trade when he was young, and that was a horrible thing. Probably the most important thing about that, concerning this name, is that he realized it, as opposed to many thousands, tens of thousands of other peoples who did participate in the slave trade. At the age of 23, he realized how horrible it was. And not only did he stop, he actually spent the rest of his life fighting against the oppression of colonizers and slave traders. So I don't see anything wrong with the name. I mean, people say it's some kind of bad symbol. It's just not. So I just hope we keep the name. That's it.
Okay.
Dave, before we go to the next person, can I just kind of put something out there in terms of guardrails for the discussion here? I realize, we got off to, what would seem a pretty abrupt start, as opposed to a normal council meeting. But I see, there are a number of people that are in the attendees, and this whole process is about hearing public input. So, I don't know if people were expecting a lot of, front end kind of discussion or anything like that. We won't be taking any action here tonight. We're really just here for you to hear your public comments. So what I would ask is, if there's anybody kind of just hanging out, waiting to put their hand up, I'd encourage you to do that now. just so that we could have an accurate account of, how many comments we need to take and being fair to everybody in terms of keeping their time limit the same. So just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if people were expecting more of a kind of typical San Anselmo Council meeting, but this is really just a community forum where we're here to hear your public input. So yeah, if you want to be part of this process, please raise your hand. So thank you, and let's proceed.
Okay, Andrea Pierce, I'm going to allow you to talk and you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I was in a business today that's a minority-owned business. It's on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. Number one, she did not realize, of course, well, not of course, but she did not realize this meeting was even occurring, or that there was a possibility that her business was going to have a different address. And that she was quite concerned when I told her about it, because she said she has a lot of money invested in different advertising and cards and everything else about with her address on Sir Francis Drake. And she was quite shocked with that, with the information. I think that we need to really be concerned about what we're doing to the businesses that already have suffered so much during this COVID, about what we're going to do with them when they're changing address on Sir Francis Drake. And as someone who was a history major, I also agree strongly that if we're going to change the name of everyone that has ever done anything wrong in their life, we may have to change the name of San Anselmo, because I'm not quite sure Saint Anselmo was exactly a saint either. So I think we have to be very careful about going down this road about changing names of things based on current feelings without really considering them strongly. So.
Thank
Okay,
you, Andrea. History aside, I think we could confirm that San Anselmo is in fact a saint.
He is a saint, but we're not quite sure if we really examined his background, whether he passed the modern day tests.
Point taken. Well, I was just trying to be lighthearted.
Okay, next we have Heidi Yeager. Heidi, I'm going to put you up next and you can unmute yourself.
I see it. It's not like a regular Zoom meeting, and I'm Zumba-ing, so it's kind of hard to find it. Can you hear me? I'm assuming you can, because you laughed at the Zumba. So I just want to agree with all the above, Judy, Michael. I am also opposed to the name change, and I also live on Sir Francis Drake. And I really want to say that I think it's unfortunate at this point, a lot of the younger generation, I think, does not have quite the grasp as the older generation does on history or following history. But like I really don't feel the need to change it. And that's all I wanted to get in today, because I wanted to make my comment known. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi.
Okay, next we have Andrea Pierce. Andrea, you're going to be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, I think Andrea just gave public comment.
Yeah.
Oh, she did. Okay, sorry, her hand was still up. Okay, next is SFD resident. I'm going to allow you. I'm going to give you a chance to talk. You can unmute yourself.
Hi there. Hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, it's Victor Turkin. I'm probably one of your oldest residents on Drake, and obviously I'm against it. I don't think this is the time to do it, guys. I think it could be looked at later, not now. You got businesses that are suffering. You've got people that are suffering. It's just not the right time. It's just not the right time. I mean, any cost associated with something like this, it's just not the right time. I agree with all the other speakers that have spoken. I mean, history is not being taught at Drake, obviously, sadly. If it was, we wouldn't be having this name change at Drake, but somebody has a mission there. But as far as the boulevard, if this goes further, I think the people of San Anselmo should vote on it. If this ends up being that type of situation, I think that's where it has to go, if it gets to that. But that's my 2 cents. I appreciate you guys, and have a great night.
Thanks, Vic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jamie Ginsburg. Jamie, you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Thanks, Dave. Hi,
Got it.
Steve. Hi, Alexis. I do not live on Sir Francis Drake, and I haven't lived here my whole life. I'm only been here the last 9 years, and it didn't really bother me driving down this street and seeing the name. And what occurred to me in the listening over the last year was that it wasn't about me and how I felt about it. And equally interesting tonight to listen to the opinions so far, which have been very strongly felt from their perspective. And I'm listening to that and I hear that. And then I also have to think about the people who are affected by it. And that's the consideration in my mind is if a name has the ability to hurt somebody and it isn't a benefit, then it was originally a marketing benefit. If it's not a benefit because it's hurting people, then what is my attachment to it? And I don't have one. So I can't speak out on holding on to the name. And I understand that there may be some cost, and I would consider it a great opportunity that most of the businesses need to reach out to their customers. I know as someone who has a business in town, I need to reach out to the community. And if I had to reach out on this issue of we're changing our name because it hurts people, I think that's an opportunity to educate people as to what your core values are and that you're considerate of other people. And I'd like to live in a community where we think about other people and we do our best to enhance their lives. And that's what I'm committed to doing for our community is I'd like to help us all lead better lives. And my contribution tonight is listening, and to those that are afflicted negatively by this, I'll listen to you as well. And I ask that you listen to the other people equally and hear it from their perspective. So thank you, council people, for listening and opening up the conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. And
Thanks.
again, for anybody participating by phone, you could hit *9 to raise your hand. Don't know if we have anybody participating by phone, but if you are, *9 to raise your hand.
Okay, next we have Andrew Popel, I believe. Andrew, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Andrew.
Hi. Sort of echoing what one of the previous commenters said. From my perspective, a lot of the names in Marin County in general in California are all legacies of Spanish colonialism, including the name of our town, San Anselmo. And so I'm curious why the emphasis on Sir Francis Drake, as opposed who actually personally didn't hurt anybody, or not nearly in the same, or that I know of in Marin County or California, versus addressing the much larger issue of Spanish colonialism in our area. So, I mean, you kind of laughed about it a little bit earlier, but it seems, and I'm not recommending changing the name of San Anselmo, but given the time that we're living in right now, it seems that focusing on a name change of this boulevard, this particular name doesn't, it seems like a one-off thing that's not part of a overall plan to affect, you know, communities in need and things like that. So to me, it just seems again, the tangential and not actually that impactful. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
And next we have Karen Dauphin. Karen, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. am definitely not in favor of changing the name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. I've lived here in San Anselmo. I don't live on Drake. I've lived here for over 45 years. It seems to me that the last person who talked about, Sir Francis Drake being so hurtful and harmful to people who have been terribly damaged by the concept of slavery that has been part of this country's history, it doesn't make sense to me. It is not the way for us to make things better. I would much prefer to see the town or the county actually do a very specific outreach to what is one or two substantive things that we can do to make things better for people who feel that they have been hurt by American society or California society specifically. And quite frankly, I just can't see that the name of Boulevard does anything helpful. And changing it wouldn't, in my mind, do anything helpful. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Grace Severson. Grace, you can unmute yourself.
You know, I had touched my hand up by mistake, but I'll go ahead and share. There was mention in California, the Spanish colonialism. I'm involved, and I'm going to talk a little bit about colonialism and the decolonization of our mind. This is a deep, deep issue. I'm involved with some activist people who are deep in this whole issue of colonization, which started even before in the 1400s with the Spain coming over and being encountered with the indigenous people. So, so with this background, for me, it appears that we've all been somehow traumatized by this larger, deep, profound colonization in America or other countries. So for some people, especially for the people of color, whether they be indigenous or Black or the Asians or Latinos, names do have a deep imprint on us. Language does have a deep imprint on us. And for those who have been colonized by the people who came here, who once started our country and were already being exploited previous to that and in slavery, it does have a deep essence. They're not the privileged white. We do have class here in this culture as other cultures. So it's a profound issue that has to be looked at very carefully because people have been traumatized over and over, people of color especially, when you have what we have now. And we're trying, I think, to heal the trauma. And there's different levels of this trauma. So whatever we can do in our way and to balance the picture out so that for our young youth, I don't have the depth of history, but I understand trauma and how it can impact us at different ages, societal trauma and individual. Right now, we're all going through trauma with the COVID, all of us worldwide. So trauma also has different layers and the healing is not easy. If one has to start with one's own self and somehow, again, look at this name change. There's so many facets to it, so many layers. So I don't live on Sir Francis Drake. So all I'm saying is to look at this. There's deep pain. And I think now COVID has kind of shown that. Also our last 4 years of government has shown how the inequity is so deep. So this is not a simple name change. It goes deeper than that. it's this whole structure that is being reviewed. We're being challenged in many ways, and we do have many needs, of course, locally, but that's what I just want to say, that this is not an easy situation when you look at it in its different dimensions, so to speak, because a lot of people are being impacted now by it. Still doesn't go away. Thank you. That's all I have
Thank you,
to
Greg.
say. You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Theo Knox. Theo, you can unmute yourself, and I will remind everybody this is a good time if you want to speak to put your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to speak in support of the name change. I also am not someone who lives on Sir Francis Drake, but I do live in San Anselmo. I've lived here for about 8 years now. And to me, this seems like a relatively small gesture that we could make in our community to make it feel a little more welcoming to everybody who lives here or who comes to patronize the businesses and support the town of San Anselmo in the many ways that can happen. And while this kind of change is relatively small or minor and will not solve the larger issues that are a play that this is symptomatic of, it does seem like the small discomfort that we may incur in our own lives in order to make someone else feel safer or more welcome on our streets seems like a much larger victory for us as a community. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Theo.
Okay, next we have Cecily Wilson. Cecily, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I would like to echo what Theo said, and also, just by the way, I grew up here and I have a house here and a business. Not that that makes my opinion any more important, but I think some people value that. So just sharing that with you. I just think this is also a nice, kind gesture and a demonstration to show that, we here in San Anselmo and in Marin, that we are welcoming and inclusive. And, I was just thinking about it, that I'm probably very lucky that I was able to grow up here because my mom was of Japanese descent, and my dad was white. And so I probably would not have been able to have been born here and grown up here if, unfortunately, if both my parents were of Japanese descent. So, I feel this, and I would really love to see us as a people, as a town, bring ourselves up and, be filled with grace and the beauty that is actually like physically around us here in Marin. And I'm very appreciative of Noah who put this forward, and I think it's great that the young people are leading this initiative, and I just think that's fantastic, and I'm ready to follow the lead of young leaders. So I'm all for it, and I hope that some people who live on Francis Drake and expressed their disappointment and lack of interest in the name change, I hope that they would reconsider. And that's it.
Thank you, Cecily.
Thank you.
So at this point, I don't see any more hands raised. So I would encourage anyone who would like, there we go, Frank. I'm going to allow Frank Gomez. I'm going to go ahead and unmute yourself, and it's your turn.
Good evening, Dave and Steve and Alexis. Thank you for taking the call. Steve and I have had a few conversations about this, exactly what we're talking about tonight over the last few months. Being a person that my ancestors were colonized by the Spanish, by my last name and being Mexican, I just feel that we're being a little bit reactionary in this name change. I feel that if you go down this path, then from what some of the other callers said, you'd have to change all the Spanish names that are on all the streets as well, and the name of the town. So, you have to look at history. As I've spoke to Steve a few times, you look at the Colosseum in Italy, look what they did, the Romans did there. You don't see them tearing that down. You look at in Germany, where I visited, the concentration camps. They keep those up to remind people of what happened and teach history and teach people not to do this again. And so I just think that by, making this come to the forefront, use it as a tool to teach people to be more accepting and giving. Changing the name isn't going to do that. Keeping the name up, you may be more impactful by teaching people more with it up, so people are talking about it. So I just think, and I own a business on this street. I live in town, and I promote and love this town. I just don't feel changing the name is going to really be more accepting. And with all due respect to the people that said that, I make up a small percentage of this town, being a minority, and I just don't want a bunch. And I don't want the majority speaking for the minority all the time. It doesn't seem like it's really doing much for us. If you guys really want to know, speak to people of color and make how they feel about it. And it might give you a different mindset. It seems to me, it's always the majority that wants to speak for the minority. And unfortunately, all of you are in charge. You're the majority. Then that's 90-something%. So please listen. I respect others' opinions that are for it, but I'm very, very opposed to it. I just don't feel that it's going to really make the changes that we need. I feel that we could effectively make so much more change and make the people of color feel much more welcome in other ways. Thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Roberta Michaels. Roberta, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Spencer, Roberta's
I'm giving
husband.
him permission.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Spencer.
Hi. A couple of points. One, Alexis started out by giving her opinion on this, so I'm wondering what she's listening to. Is any, since your opinion is already made up, I find that a little bit distracting. Point number two, if we want to do something for minority communities, we should build some housing. The city has been unwilling to comply with the state regulations on minority housing, low-cost housing. We don't have enough room, you keep saying, but obviously that would make a heck of a lot more impact than changing the name of the street. And the third point is just a sort of a personal one. Have you ever gone out to Drake's Beach and looked around and read the comments on the plaques they have there? The fact that this guy Drake in 1500s sailed a terrible little ship all the way across the ocean and landed in Marin County. It's an amazing story of excitement and daring, and it's inspiring. And yeah, he probably was a slave trader for a while, but he apparently got out of that business. And he did something that's really inspiring, undaunted courage. So I think you can't just throw that away. You got to listen to that. And being, when I go out to Drake's Beach and I read that, and I read it every time I go out there, I'm inspired by it. So why not name the street after him and leave it the way it is? Thanks.
There was one thing, and I'm Roberta, we're married and I'm sharing my iPad with him. And I know that your mayor and I think one of the council people in Larkspur suggested putting Miwok Trail along with Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. It just seemed like a nice way of atoning, if that's what people want to do, and keeping the original name, not to punish. And I don't live on Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, but not to punish a lot of people who have businesses there, and a lot of people who I think may feel like Spencer does, that this man shouldn't just be destroyed for making a mistake when he was in his 20s. Thanks.
Thank you, Roberta.
And
Thank you
next, next we have Allison Waugh. Allison, you're going to be able to unmute yourself.
Let's see, that worked.
Hi, so I actually don't know much of, like, I haven't delved into all the details, but from what I understand, or what I've read, there is a group of the Coast Miwok descendants from Marin and Sonoma who support the name change. So I think that it is their voice that we should be listening to, and not just in general, whether it's a minority or majority voice, but those are the people who have been affected. And I think that whether or not we change the name, it would be great to do something to honor them. And if this is some small way to do it, then it's something we should consider. And I love that everybody talks about the idea of doing something more substantial. Yet, like, I mean, that's great on the assumption that something more substantial actually happens. And to me, that's actually much harder to get done than what people propose. And so I think if it's a small way to honor the Coast Miwoks to change this name, and I understand that logistically for people that living on Sir Francis Drake, it's going to be hard, and maybe we can provide some support for the businesses. But I just would encourage people to recognize, like, this is not about eliminating or cancel culture, or it's about trying to honor a group of people that have, largely been forgotten and not paid attention to. And I don't really see the harm in that. Logistically, like, it is possible to change names. That does happen. And this is one possible opportunity we have to do that. And so I actually really disagree with the idea of having both names, because if we've determined that Sir Francis Drake is offensive to a group of people, keeping that name up there is not a solution in my mind. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Hold on one sec.
I see one hand.
Maria, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, I live in San Anselmo now and grew up in Fairfax, and my family used to own and run the Drake's Beach Cafe. So this has been an interesting thing to follow. I'm kind of relating it to what just happened in Washington, DC, with a lot of people rushing into the Capitol with total misconceptions going on in their heads. And so I'm not exactly trying to defend anybody from the 1500s or what their motives were, but I do know a lot about what Drake did. And the fact that we're calling him offensive for getting, the Miwok's demise, which of course is, tragic for everybody, is really just wrong, if not disingenuous, because they persisted in their natural state for 200 years after Drake was here. He was here for 5 weeks, did not harm any Miwoks, brought back the first drawings and descriptions of the Miwoks to England. That was England's first knowledge about California Indians, Miwoks. There was no problem. Sarah Maino came 15 years later, had a short stint there as well with the Miwoks. And 200 years later, the mission people came up. So that was the Spaniards and Mexicans. There was absolutely no killing off, no harming of Miwoks. Drake was not a colonizer of any place. So to call him a symbol of colonizing is just, historically wrong. He did not own slaves. Many people think he owned slaves, just to let you know. Besides those few trips that he did in his early 20s, apparently were able to forgive Malcolm X for prostituting women in his 20s. I've heard the San Francisco school district say that's okay because he changed. I don't see how you can do it for one person and not for another. So Drake did not own slaves. He was not a colonizer. He did not harm the Miwok. So why we're choosing him? I'm just so glad I don't have my business anymore. Drake's Beach Cafe, I'm sure it would be, I'd have to shutter it and fire all the, kids from the ranches who worked for me. We couldn't have a business like that in this climate, this political climate. We've chosen to pick somebody for a symbol. It could have been Gutenberg with the printing press, that was the end of primitive civilizations. And to think that anything European is bad, this is kind of a weird, I'm totally up with Black Lives Matter, and I'm totally interested in indigenous cultures. My father had the Tamaland Press, which printed a lot of local literature. We, to talk about not respecting Miwoks, I'm sorry, we have Marin County, which is named after a Miwok chief. Our main mountain, Mount Tamalpais. We have Olima, we have Tokoloma, we have Olampali, we have Nicasio. Those are all indigenous names. I don't think people even know that. So the names, it's not the names that make a difference. It's teaching people, going out and respecting them, spending time out there. I've taken my kids to the summer camps. We go to big time festival all the time at Cooley Loklo. There's a lot of stuff going on. You don't need to do one more name that apparently people don't even pay attention to. So my main thing is, you're kind of picking a symbol that's really historically inaccurate. And I think you're going to actually, inconvenience so many apartment dwellers. If you look in Fairfax, anyway, those are people who are not economically at the top of the heap. All those people in all those apartments on Sir Francis Drake are going to have to change their green cards, their passports, their driver's license during a pandemic. Who the hell are you helping here? Sorry. And I'll quit there, but I'm really against this. And I have to say, I know many, many, many people who are, but they're afraid to say anything because of the political climate. So I'll check off at this point.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, next we have Renee. Renee, you can unmute yourself.
Thanks, you guys. And I appreciate everything that everybody shared. So I have a business on Sir Francis Drake. I hope I don't cry. First off, the supervisors haven't told those people on Sir Francis Drake that they were even having town halls. So we were never told about it. The last town hall that the supervisors did, they didn't answer any questions. They said that obviously due to COVID, this is a problem. I'm incredibly concerned financially about what the implications of a name change in a pandemic will mean, one, for me with my business. So driver's licenses, passports, I'm assuming I'm going to have to employ somebody over a month to pay them to do all of the vendors and everything that I do business-wise. Then it's $150,000 to change the name. Who's paying for all the different chunks of the name change? And then Ross says no, you say yes, Fairfax says no. I mean, does anybody have any idea, if you live on Sir Francis Drake, what it implies? I can barely breathe in COVID. And I think that this discussion is super important, but I don't understand why we don't put this off and just get vaccines taken care of, and all your time is spent helping get older people to get vaccines that, that the supervisors, everybody seems to say we have enough time for all of it. But, I think it's an incredibly important discussion. I financially am very concerned about it. And if you don't live on Sir Francis Drake, then obviously it's a lot easier to say this is great, but for those of us, and you were talking about apartments, there are a lot of businesses. I think that we need to invest in keeping the businesses open right now. So that's my 2 cents worth. And I really appreciate you guys are doing a really good job with this town hall.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Danette City. Danette, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I was born and raised in San Anselmo, as were my parents. So although I no longer live there, I just kind of wanted to weigh in a little bit. And if you'll bear with me, I'm not feeling really well, but I want to come at this from a social cognitive perspective and an academic one. I hold a PhD in experimental social psychology. And I've been following this discussion originally with the renaming of the high school and the renaming of the boulevard. And one of the things I've noticed is, one, a lack of scholarly inquiry. I've not seen anyone except for one person who has been able to identify a scholarly work that describes Drake the way he's being described. If you listen to the library listening session, that particular book is not supported by the majority of historians. His thesis of who Drake was is not supported by the majority of historians, according to the professor who spoke during the Marin County Library listening session. And I think it's important to go back and review what he had to say. The other thing is that people are responding to him, calling him a murderer and a rapist and a slaveholder, which we know is factually incorrect. And these are emotive words, right? They're done to create feelings of anger and disgust. And the interesting thing about these two emotions is that they are positively correlated. But what makes that interesting is that anger is considered an approach emotion. So what we mean by that, the best example I can give you is if someone makes you mad, you have that urge to slug them. You don't do it, but you have that urge, right? That's going forward. Disgust is an avoidance emotion. Disgust says, I want that away from me. So when you become angry at something and disgusted by it, the response is to push it away from you. And when you use emotive language like he was a slave trader, which is not entirely accurate. Yes, he was on a couple of voyages, but he was not in charge of those voyages. He was a low level member on those slave trading voyages, and it's worthwhile to read about it and to understand what he did and what his participation was. It's also important to know what he did when he had his own fleet and his rejection of slavery after that. But these emotive language brings up these feelings of anger and disgust. And if you don't do your scholarly reading to investigate further, then the reaction is, I want this guy out of here. Right? If you're only going to accept this notion and not do your scholarly homework and do your due diligence, then this becomes the reaction. It becomes what is the popular position. So it's very frustrating to watch and see how this is getting played out from a social side perspective. I think it's worthwhile to pick up multiple books or multiple documents that give you more information and a broader perspective of who Drake was. And it may be controversial, but it's worthwhile doing that. That's what a good scholar does. We dig deep and we look not only at the original source that we're reading, but we also check that source material. The book I mentioned earlier that paints Drake in this very negative light comes from a lot of Spanish source material. And he wasn't very popular among the Spaniards. I think we can understand why, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is, I actually don't support the name change, but I do support the idea of a dual name for the boulevard. I even think an idea of putting up those brown historical signs acknowledging that this was the Miwok Trail is also worth considering. But I really want to encourage you to really dig deep into the material and understand who this man was, and to also put it in the context of history. This is an important thing to do, and to understand the context of it. I'm a huge Malcolm X fan, but I agree with the notion that if Malcolm X pimped out women, then why is it okay to have his name? That might be offensive to me as a woman. It's not, but it could be. So you want to apply an equal understanding of how what happened in context and historical context. And so that's what I want to encourage you to do. Please dig a little deeper and reconsider this name change proposal. There are other answers to this question. Also, I want to add that I've listened to the woman who, her first name is Lauren, I don't remember her last name, who has put together the petition to change the name of the boulevard. And while I haven't seen the petition, I haven't heard her say anything about how she feels it should be named after the Miwok or in some way of recognizing the Miwok. What I'm getting from her is simply that she does not like Sir Francis Drake and she's offended by the name. That's all that I've gotten from listening to her in many of these town council meetings, the Tamalpais Union, high school district trustee meetings. I've not heard her say, I think it should be named after or something connected to the Miwok Trail. So while I agree that acknowledging the Miwok is an important thing for Marin County to do, I'm not sure that's what's inspired this. So thanks for letting me chime in a little bit, even though I'm no longer a resident. I loved San Anselmo, loved growing up there, and appreciate you all very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Danette.
So at this point, there are no more hands raised. If anybody would like to make a cup, here we go. We have someone, TC, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Victoria Canby, and I've been on the fence about calling in because it's just a little bit of outside my comfort zone to talk about this because it's my, the town that I grew up in. I'm just gonna say, I hear a lot of people saying that, young people and a lot of people don't understand history or that we need to put it in context of history. But I think one thing that's really missing is that history has been written by white people and it's not written by people of color. And it's just one-sided story. It really is. And so when we say like, oh, Sir Francis Drake was nice to the Miwok people when he came here, I mean, there's not really a written record of that from the Native perspective. And I also find it really interesting that we can just erase his participation in the slave trade. I don't know how you can overlook anything like that. Like if we really look at what that means as a human being to participate in something as monstrous as that, it's just not excusable. It's not something we can overlook historically. I don't really know if everybody who is out there speaking on this issue has really been directly impacted by colonization, but as a person who, I am a Native woman, I've lived in San Anselmo my entire life. I own a house here. My family has commercial property here. We've been here since the 1920s. I'm deeply invested in the visioning for this town. And I went to Drake, and when I found out who Drake was when I was at high school there, I was really disgusted to know that a pirate, pirates are infamous for murder and rape and just awful things, thieves, was the mascot for the school that I was going to. And I couldn't understand how we could have the main artery of the entire county named after this person. What does that say? What is that the message of our county? That's really disturbing. And recently my 9-year-old son was sitting in the back of the car and he looked at me and he said, "Mom, who's Sir Francis Drake?" And I had to tell him, and he couldn't understand it. He just couldn't make sense of why this name would be up there. And so to me, as you know, I'm the interim executive director at the Museum of the American Indian. And what I do for my job and my work is I educate people about American Indian culture. And there's a rich history here of American Indian people, the Coast Miwok people. And we have an opportunity to uplift them. And somebody was saying, oh, there's so much, you know, that's been done for the Coast Miwok people in this area. And I'm sorry to say that's not really true. Marin has a lot to do for Native people. There's not a lot of visibility here. So this is a chance for Marin to listen to Native voices, perhaps work together with Native people to choose a name that's honoring their language, promote language revitalization, and use this as a tool for our kids, because we can show that this is not okay, that these things can't continue. And that we are going to celebrate this beautiful heritage that we have here. And I think it's a really teachable moment. It's a chance for change. And I've been waiting for this my entire life as a kid who grew up here. And I'd love to see that for my son. Thanks.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Steve Dodge. Steve, you're going to be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm not a resident of San Anselmo. I grew up there. I grew up on Estates Drive, which ironically had its name changed from Gunpowder Lane, which was more originally consistent with the Sleepy Hollow theme, but I guess people didn't want to live on Gunpowder Lane. So they changed it to Estates. And so this conversation is one that is happening all the time. And where I live now is in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I just wanted to echo Victoria's comments, because something that she touched on is something that is happening in Canada, and it has been happening in Canada for a number of years, which is Indigenous revitalization and restoration. And I think that's something that I've been listening. I didn't want to join in before other people from San Anselmo had said their piece. But as things are going on, there are some things that I didn't hear that I'd like to just say. And one is that something that's been missing from this conversation, both at the school as well as about the road, is the focus has been all about, Drake and removing the name. And what has not been discussed as much is what you would put in his place. And I think that's the thing that what motivates me in this discussion is that you have this name that you could replace with something that you could use that. And in this moment, at a time, in the moment, during the racial uprisings, and controversy around, or just interest in doing something about how we live, how we experience race in America, doing something where you remove a name that is indeed associated with colonization and with white supremacy, although not because Drake was a white supremacist or a colonizer, but because he was used by colonizers and white supremacists in the 19th century. And if you go into that 19th century literature and you look at books, they talk about the savage Indians and they talk about the hero explorers and pioneers. And so those are two narratives that were coexisting at the same time, and they served exactly the same function, which was to elevate the white people who were the Anglo-Americans who were colonizing the area, and to denigrate the indigenous people who lived there at the time, and to exclude them and to erase them. And so what Drake has, the placement of the name on the street is an erasure of indigenous history. And it is something that now, in this moment of hope around, trying to build a multiracial democracy, you can use that space to reach out to indigenous people, specifically the Miwok, and say, hey, we're going to do this and we want to build a relationship with you, and then follow through. And so that's, I think, the answer to those people who question, what the connection of this to, to what's going on today is that, this legacy of white supremacy is something that is very much with us. And that's why when all of the, when the uprisings were going on, that's why people focused their attention on monuments, is because they were symbols of this historical legacy that they were still experiencing. So right now, we can now move forward to hopefully do something where we give something back and reach out to people who deserve our respect and love and bring them in and try and do something together. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Alicia. Alicia, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I too am of Native and European descent, and I live in San Anselmo, and I'm also an educator of California Indian Studies. And Drake was here such a short amount of time, while as the Coast Miwok and even the Southern Pomo were here for thousands and thousands of years. And they managed the land sustainably, and it's why Marin is so wonderful, because of their rich culture. So I want to follow on the heels of Victoria and Steve, as I agree with both of them very much. I think that the Coast Miwok certainly deserve to be recognized and consulted with by way of what name they would like. And in terms of a name, my personal opinion is maybe something like the Olima Trail, because that one is, I think, something that both Miwoks, Native people, and non-Native people could relate to, hikers and educators and people who travel. And it was indeed the trail that went, I believe, from San Rafael all the way over to the Point Reyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we have no more hands raised. Encourage anybody that would like to provide us input, raise your hand.
And Dave, while we have this time, maybe Alexis and I can spend a couple of minutes just talking about the costs here based on the research that staff did. With that, I have the public costs that I could, if you want me to share my screen, Dave. I don't know if you have it up.
I think Carla can allow you to do that.
Okay, I have the share screen icon here, so let me.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yep. So, and let me just put up what I have here. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
So this is basically the public costs minus any, kind of staff time, because that, just isn't known pretty much until stuff gets done. But these are the hard costs in terms of, for the municipalities. This doesn't include the local businesses. But as you can see, the top part there, it's the breakdown between the different cities within the Drake corridor. And, also you could see the replacement costs underneath for signs on traffic signals, standard signs, large roadside signs, that all in kind of like the wayfinding areas. And they've kind of estimated the costs. And as you can see there, San Anselmo has probably, in terms of the cities within the jurisdiction, not counting the county, San Anselmo carries the highest cost there, but it's only $3,500, so it's not astronomical. Also they estimate the costs with Caltrans, but believe they'll run approximately 25 to 30,000 for the entire jurisdiction. So as you can see here, these are the hard costs that have been established. there had been some outreach through the county process that they, spoke to businesses and whatnot and tried to estimate, what the costs would be for, say, a business to change their stationery or make updates to their website. The overall thought on that was that, those costs wouldn't be as much as well. That's kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to have these forums here, is to hear from not just our residents and how they feel about this issue, but also the business owners that would be impacted. And I'm glad to have heard some tonight. But in terms of the costs, this is essentially the hard public costs. And again, they're not astronomical, but when you look at it, we have the most standard signs and the most traffic signals that would need changes. And so we, as a town, we'd be looking at a roughly $3,500 price tag on the public side.
Thanks, Steve. And I'll add in a little bit some of the research that staff did as far as the requirements for property owners and businesses. So there's no government filings that would be required of property owners because the assessor and recorder use APNs, not street addresses, to log documents. So these offices, record whatever ordinances and resolutions jurisdictions pass for street names and then reference them as needed, but they're not the primary source of legal reference for the assessor and the recorder. As far as the post office, when street names change, the jurisdiction or jurisdictions notify USPS. So the residents and businesses do not have to notify USPS themselves. It's done as a whole jurisdiction. And after the effective date of the name change, USPS guarantees an 18-month period called a forwarding period, where it essentially recognizes both addresses. And in most cases, even after the 18-month period, the local postmaster will continue to deliver mail, even if it's addressed to the old address. If you have your zip +4, then the mail is delivered regardless of the street name on the item. As far as the DMV, it's advisable, but to my knowledge, not legally required that folks update their driver's license or other identification forms within 18 months of the date of the name change, just as you might if you were moving addresses. And that information is available as attachment 1 of the staff of the agenda item for our January 12th meeting. Again, it's available if you click on the link to tonight's forum. All of this information is part of the webpage there. So hopefully that clarifies some questions. I know there's a lot of logistical pieces that are maybe murky or unclear, but that is the information that we have so far. So thank you.
So at this point, we don't see any hands raised, but we'll put out another call for folks to raise their hand and make any public comments. I've seen one come in. If everybody else who you were thinking about, raising your hand and making a comment, now would be a good time to do it. We definitely want to hear from you. I see one hand, so let's go to Rich.
That sounds great. I'll do that. I also wanted to let Councilmember Berto and Vice Mayor Feynman that our town clerk has received an email that the person has requested that she read into the record. So we'll see how we have time for that.
Sure.
Rich, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. I've been listening to this since the beginning and have sat in on several of the other sessions. I'm a little concerned about the downplay of the costs. I am actually a person who lives on Sir Francis Drake, and I'm looking at a whole series of things that I will have to do and incur costs on that I don't see reflected anywhere in your estimates at this point. And I am just one of reasonably thousands of people that will have to incur these. such as contacting mortgage lenders, contacting credit card companies. And I understand for 18 months, things will get forwarded, but at the end of 18 months, I have an obligation that I've got to get bills and correspondence to me, and there's a cost associated with that. I also have to change things like my business cards and all the rest. I don't see any of that factored into this. So when you say 3,500 from a public perspective, I think that may be a reasonable estimate. But I think the private estimate is probably the one that is much more important as you go forward looking at this and thinking about what may be a realistic cost figure for this proposed name change. And I will say, as you may tell, I'm not in favor of it. We've heard a lot of people who have come forward and had various concerns, many of which I agree with. But I think as you move forward through your process, getting a better handle on what the costs are to individuals and to businesses is going to be really important, because I think your 3,500 is going to go up multitudes as you find out what the actual cost will be. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Just point well taken. And I'll say again, those costs that I put up in when I was sharing my screen, those are solely the public costs. Realizing that there are certainly costs to the businesses and the homeowners that aren't reflected in there. And again, that's part of why we're having these forums, is to really, hear from people what their impact would be. So appreciate your comments, Rich. And I see another hand, so we could go to Andrew.
Okay, Andrew, you're going to be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. Good evening. I just want to make a statement real quick, and I'll sign off. My name's Andrew Samuels, and I'm a father, and I am a member of a multiracial household, and we live here in San Anselmo, and our family has roots in San Anselmo going back to the 20s. I'd like to voice my advocacy for changing the name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. As a parent, I feel this is an opportunity for us to show the community and our children positive changes that can be made, and that we support no longer tolerating ethnically centered historical narratives written by essentially white people. History is written by the victors. So in essence, the story of Sir Francis Drake didn't come from the slaves who he was, shuttling, or the indigenous people he came in contact with. Needless to say, his story is a little whitewashed. I'd like to see, in place of Sir Francis Drake street name, perhaps an homage to the original stewards of the land, who are the coastal Miwok. Tribal members can be consulted for the proper language and the names, and a name in their language that ultimately supports language revitalization for San Anselmo. It offers us a chance to engage in a meaningful dialogue with our children and our community that educates not only us about the indigenous roots of our area, but informs our community about where we are all going in the future. If we as a community can rally around Christmas lights and flower boxes on street posts and signs for every town event and painted electrical boxes, I just feel at the very least, San Anselmo should be able to rally around a meaningful and socially conscious effort such as the name change. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
We have no more hands raised. Should we ask the town clerk to read the email that came in?
I see somebody's hand raised that has spoken before. So let me just say real quick is that we won't be taking anybody a second time. So I don't know if that's Amy with Jamie, and if so, please keep your hand up. But if you've already spoken, we will not be taking a second round of the same people of public comment, just out of courtesy to everybody. Dave, I see that hand has gone down. So let's hear from the person that emailed.
Okay.
Okay, the email is from
Pascal Sisich.
Mhm.
And he says, please don't change the name of Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. I think this effort is misdirected and a waste of your valuable time. It does nothing to correct any social injustice. Please spend more time on bread and butter issues like fixing streets and sidewalks. I'm opposed to a name change. Thank you for your service to our town.
Thank you for reading that, Carla. All right, at this point, still not seeing any additional hands raised. So I'll tell you how this is going to, well, actually, let me ask how this is going to work first. Dave, did we have a set time? Do we have to go till like 8 o'clock, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think everybody that wanted to be here is probably here, but we did say 6 to 8. So we could, hang on the line to see if anybody else comes. I also can't remember if we had mentioned that the council is going to be taking this up at their meeting on the 9th of March. So that'll be the next step in our process. We'll be transcribing all of everybody's comments and attaching those to that staff report. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. This is the next step in our process. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, in terms, in terms of how this will work, we could do it a couple of ways. I have viewed a couple of the other forums that were not our forum. And I know that Fairfax was in a similar situation, and what they opted to do was to just basically put a message up on the screen saying that, if you would like to make public comment at this point, please raise your hand. We'll have staff still watching this, and I would be open to keeping this open until 8 o'clock to allow for maximum public comment. Alexis and I can turn off our cameras, and in the event that there is somebody who raises their hand in that time, then we can certainly pop our cameras back on and hop back on. Just want to first check with staff and Alexis to see if that all sounds good to you guys.
That sounds like a fair thing to do, Steve, but I'll let Alexis chime in too.
I agree. Thanks.
Okay, great. So here's how this will work. I am going to give a going once, going twice. When that happens, I'd ask anybody who's currently in the attendees list, if you haven't spoken yet and you wish to do so, please raise your hand when I say going once, going twice. And because once we're done there, Alexis and I will pop off our cameras. Our town will put a notice on the screen. And then certainly if you haven't spoken and want to speak at that point, you could raise your hand and we will be here. With that, I will say going once, going twice, and okay. So we'll take a brief break here, and in the event that a hand is raised, we will come back on. In the event that one isn't, we'll come back with about 5 or let's say 10 minutes, 5 minutes, prior to 8 o'clock. And then we'll formally close it. So with that, I am going to turn off my camera and get something to eat.
All right. Councilmember Berto, we haven't seen any hands go up since we took the break, just so you know. What can I hear?
Oh, you're muted, Steve.
I just figured that out. Thanks. I do see that we have Grace Severson's hand up, but I do realize that Grace spoke earlier. Grace, we'd mentioned before we went to break that we wouldn't be doing a second round of people who have already spoken once. So if this is someone else in your household or somebody that you're with that cares to make a comment on this, you could leave your hand up, but otherwise I would ask you to lower your hand. Dave, I see that Grace's hand is still up, so maybe we could just check in there for a minute.
Grace, you can unmute yourself if your hand is, if it's that not working.
Well, otherwise,
Yeah.
did you get her, Dave?
I can't seem to, it won't allow me to let her talk. Carla, is there a way for you to see if you can make Grace able to talk as the host?
I'm clicking on the button, but it doesn't seem to be bringing up a
Yeah.
mic.
I'm wondering if she's signed off and that's just static.
I'm
Gotcha.
gonna lower her hand, and if they
Okay.
want to speak, they can raise it again. Let's see if it'll.
I think she's off now. She just signed off. I think there was a glitch there.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. Glad to see that some people stayed on. We are at 7:58, so I'm going to give one last call for raised hands for comments from anybody who hasn't spoken already. So I'll give the going once, going twice, and I see no hands. So with that, I guess I'll say first and foremost, thanks to everybody for coming out and sharing your thoughts on this issue. That was absolutely our goal tonight, which was to receive public input on this issue. Like I said earlier, we won't be taking any action here tonight, but this item will be on our March 9th agenda. So if you care to participate in that process, there will also be public comment there as well. You can certainly do so. The information is on the town's website, sananselmo.org. And we, again, thank you for your participation tonight and hope to see you on March 9th. Councilmember Feynman, did you have any parting words?
Really, Steve, just echoing what you said. Thank you to everyone who came out and for sharing your perspectives. Definitely an informative evening for me, and I assume for Steve, for you as well. And as noted, this information is all available online on the town's website, and we will be discussing whether or not to change the name at the March 9th meeting. So
great. And again, thank you everybody for coming out and sharing your thoughts on this. We heard a wide range of perspectives on this, and this is something that the full council will be taking under consideration. Just to remind folks, the reason why it's just Councilmember Feynman and myself tonight is because we are the two representatives of the San Anselmo Town Council on the county committee to discuss this issue. So I know that our colleagues on the council were either here tonight or will be watching at a later time because, as I mentioned, we will be taking this up on March 9th. And with that, want to thank the staff, Dave, Carla, Linda, fabulous job putting this together, and making sure that Alexis and I were on point and ready to do this. And a final thanks to everybody who participated. You're really what makes our town go, and we need to hear from you. So with that, we're at 8 o'clock, and so I believe we can close. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.